Welcome to the My Career, My Calling podcast, a voice of hope for people of faith in the marketplace. This podcast is brought to you by the Marketplace Missions Movement, a not-for-profit organization supporting Christians seeking to identify, develop, build, and expand their ministries and calling into the marketplace. The movement is seeking to empower, build up, and activate believers for authentic and impactful participation in sharing the message and love of Jesus Christ and demonstrating the principles of the kingdom of God in their workplaces and through their professions. Meet our moderator, Dr. Stephanie Fletcher-Larty, a well-rounded public health professional, researcher, author, strategic leadership advisor, gospel musician, and spiritual leader. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the My Career, My Calling podcast. Please stay tuned as we bring you another inspiring discussion to help build you up on your purpose-driven journey in the marketplace. Welcome to the My Career, My Calling podcast. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie Fletcher-Larty. Today, I am going to be in the hot seat, and I have a very special guest here with me who's going to be helping me going through this conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about professional believers on marketplace missions, and I am going to be in the hot seat today. So help me welcome my co-host, Mrs. Jennifer Williams.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie Fletcher-Larty. It's so good that you have given me the opportunity to talk to you today. As you said, you are in the hot seat, and so I have some hot questions for you. And I know you're very hot, so you'll be able to just talk to me and let your audience know a little more about you and also the marketplace mission. And of course, you are the head of this mission, and I've seen where the Lord has used you in so many different ways, and particularly in this one to bring about a change in the marketplace, to bring about public awareness and the need for believers, for Christians to stand in the marketplace and to also function to the glory of God. So today I have
Amen.
a few questions for you, and I'm going to start. I know the introduction gives us a little about you, but I'm just going to ask you to tell the listeners a little more about you. Who is Stephanie Fletcher-Larty? And we'll move on to some other questions. So tell us who you are, a little about you.
Thank you so much, Lady Jen. I am really delighted to be here, and I really appreciate having you with me here so that we can have this conversation. All right. So, who am I? Ha. Sometimes I find it a little bit difficult to answer that question. But when people ask me to introduce myself, I usually start off by just a brief summary of, what I'm doing now. So I am an epidemiologist. I am a researcher and an evaluation specialist. Yeah, I was born in a rural community in Jamaica. I was trained as a public health inspector, and I moved up the ranks, became a regional environmental health officer in 2008. Shortly after I finished my master's degree, then I got a scholarship from a University of Technology, Sydney in Australia, where I was successful in completing a doctorate. Um, so I completed my doctoral studies in 2013, and I remained in Australia after I finished my PhD. I'm also a singer and a songwriter. I am a recording artist, so my music is available on many different platforms on YouTube Music. I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever. I'm an author. I've published one book, but I've also published multiple scientific articles from my research work and my public health work. So you can find me anywhere, in journals. If you search for my name, you can, you know. And I'm also a pastor. I am the executive pastor at Destiny Impact Worship Center in Sydney, Australia. These are only but a few of the things I do. And I'm also the founder of the Marketplace Missions Movement, which is a ministry that I have given birth to through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit to empower people in the marketplace to really use their God given, you know, purpose and channel that for the glory and honor of the name of the Lord. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. But I have garnered so much from the little bit. You seem to be very well rounded. And also, you seem to have a passion for quite a number of things. I mean, you have moved from um, an epidemiologist, you have gone into evaluation, you're an evaluation specialist. And to be honest with you, it's the first time I'm hearing somebody who are talking to somebody who is an evaluation specialist. So I think
Yes.
in the long run, I'll hear a little more about you. And then you
Yeah.
move from rural Jamaica to Australia. So it's like from one end of the spectrum of the world to another. And I'm sure you're having a whale of a time where you are as well. And you're an author, you sing, you record, you write, and you have founded the marketplace ministry, market
Yes.
movement, missions movement, marketplace missions movement. So that is a lot, even though it's packed in a nutshell. And so with all of these things that you have done, are doing, and I'm sure you have more things to explore, tell me, what are you most passionate about? If you can tell me in a few words, with all of these things, what are you most passionate about?
Thank you, Jen. Look, for me, I'm passionate about quite a few things. And some people might say, how can one person be so passionate about so many things? But I think God gives people capacity. Yeah. And I feel like I'm one of those people who have a huge capacity to be passionate about several different things. Firstly, I'm passionate about people.
Mhm.
I think if you look at all the things I've done, you can see that people are at the center of literally every single role, everything that I do. I love people ever since I was a little girl, as a little Sunday school student, who was very devoted and, to to my Sunday school and to church. I used to see my mom visiting people, and this was so natural for her. Visiting people, looking after the elderly, if someone was unwell in our community, just and sometimes they didn't have to be unwell, but like very elderly people who can't maneuver as well as I remember there was an old lady who lived near to me. She had Parkinson's disease, and she shook a lot, and my mom would sometimes help with her care and so on, and that just fascinated me, and I started to just really love people from really early in my life. And so I love people, and I think that really came out in my role as a public health inspector when I started my career in the mid 90s in Jamaica, working in rural communities. I think this job really helped me to live out that love for people's working in the communities and supporting them to identify health problems and just being a resource for people. I just came alive. It was just something that set me on fire, to be honest. So people are the underlining, I would say, of all the things I'm passionate. People are at the center of everything. The second thing that I'm passionate about is walking in purpose. Yeah, as someone who struggled in my early life to really understand what purpose was, because I didn't understand I was born with a purpose. I struggled initially, but the moment I realized that I was born with a purpose, I I started to realize that. it was very important for me to walk in that purpose. And so as I began to walk in purpose, it was important for me not just to have a dream, but to fulfill those dreams, you know. So as a young female in a very male dominated profession, when I started out as a health inspector, I started to recognize how the struggle was real. And I decided that fulfilling my purpose was more important than impressing people. So, walking in purpose is something that I'm particularly passionate about, not just for myself, but I'm also passionate about seeing other people fulfilling their purpose. And people might ask me why. Why am I so into other people? Well, remember, I started off by saying that I am into people. I love people. So and it's natural, it's genuine, and those who know me, those who have known me over the years will tell you that what I'm saying is true. I love to see people use their gifts. I love to see people walking in their calling. I love to see other people doing something they enjoy and do it well. So what I've what I've done over my years and through the various roles I've performed is to come alongside people and to, in whatever way possible, help them. I'm the kind of person that we would say in Jamaica, give people a lift, give them a hand, give them an opportunity, open a door. And I feel like that is something that defines me as a person, and it is woven throughout whatever I do. And maybe the last thing I would say that I'm passionate about is to build other people's capacity. So I love people. I am passionate about working in purpose, not just for me, but for other people. But the thing that I think I do really well, regardless of where I am, whether I'm singing or I'm pastoring or I'm doing my professional work in the public health field as a researcher, epidemiologist, is building people's capacity. So, in whatever way I can help someone be a better version of themselves, I am I find myself more often than not doing that. And I believe that is really what motivates me. This is what I'm passionate about.
Okay, thank you. You seem to be motivated by quite a few things. For some people, especially if they are young, they'll just have one level of motivation, but you seem to have a wide range of things that motivate you. People, and when you mention people, I see your face light up. So I can tell that you're really talking the truth, and you gave a live example of the elderly in your community and the things that you have learned from your mom. Then you talk about walking in purpose, and this is so important because the Bible tells you that without a vision, the people perish, and
Yes,
vision and purpose are linked. So if you know your purpose and you know what vision God has for you, and you strive to fulfill that vision as well, I believe that can lead to purpose. And then you have taken it beyond yourself. You're talking about giving up persons a chance to build
yes,
their capacity, because no doubt you have recognized that each person has a capacity, and until we maximize that capacity, we are not fully filled and we're not fully engaged in what we're supposed to do. So before I go to another question, I just want you to expand a little, like to give me an example of how you have ever helped someone to build his or her capacity. Tell us a little more about that.
sure. Okay, I do this a lot at work. So individually, I have an innate ability to identify talent. And I think it would be fair for me to say that as someone who has been in the position of an underdog, I can spot the underdogs, if you know what I mean, not in a derogatory way, but those people who are those people who have talent but have no opportunities. And I've done since ever since I can remember. Let me take it from maybe back home in my days in Jamaica. For example, in my church, I would see the kids who are some of my Sunday school students. I remember there was one young girl in my Sunday school who got pregnant at 13 years old. And it just baffled me that something like that could happen to someone, not because it couldn't happen to me, but because I probably had escaped, and because there were many dangers where I grew up, and that could have been me. And I remember one day I just felt such deep compassion for this child, and I approached the mom, and I asked her, how is she coping with being a mother at 13? What is that like for her, and how is that affecting her own dreams? I always feel like everybody have a dream. So I remember the mom shared with me how the child really wanted to go back to school because at that age, she hadn't even started her own life. And I felt impressed that if I could make a difference, but the parents didn't have the finances to provide, the school bag or the transport and so on. And I felt like I was in a position. I wasn't married then. I didn't have any children. It was just me and Jesus. And I went alongside and I told the mom that I would help. And that was probably one of the first, that was something that I did to change the life of someone. I also raised a child. As a young woman, I didn't officially adopt, but another young person from my church who was struggling. They didn't have a strong parental guidance at the time. The mom was also struggling. And this child, I really somehow fell in love with the child. And this child came to spend holiday with me and just never went back home for like almost 7 years. Yeah. Um,
Okay.
so this
Thank
child
you
became
so much.
my child. She became my daughter. She became my daughter. I sent her to school. I bought her clothes. She lived with me. The mom just said, "Let her stay with you," and it was okay. And we lived together like mother and daughter for many years. And until she went to university, I paid her university fees, and so on and so forth. Um, in From a professional perspective, I do it on the job every day as a manager. I remember heading up teams in Jamaica, and some of my teammates were unsure or not as confident as I was. I probably would say it like that. And I would share with them how to become more confident in presenting, how to be more confident in, as a professional. And I was always looking for opportunities to help people. Here in Australia, I believe I've probably maybe made the biggest impact in terms of building people's capacity. I still continue to support people. Lots of people back home contact me when they are going to study, doing their higher education, with their research thesis. I think people know me around the world as a leader in research, and I get a lot of respect, especially from my former colleagues back home in Jamaica. They will contact me to ask me for guidance, and even some of them are working at the global level. People will run things by me, ask me for ideas and so on. But at work, in my current role, I've actually developed an innovative training program to build people's capacity in research and evaluation. It's an innovative discovery, I could call it. I developed that program to teach people how to do this, but not just to give them information, but to hold their hand through the process. It's something I've been doing over the years. I support businesses, I support entrepreneurs who are setting up business. I help people to write policies, develop training programs. And as I said, a lot of these things I've done, and not for profit. I haven't collected any money. It's just me sharing what I have inside of me to empower other people.
Thank you so much. You seem like a go-to person. I think I'll have to come to you too. Because when somebody is so resourceful, you find that it attracts other people, and also your career, your calling actually comes out in your attempt to do what you do best, and in your attempt to really challenge not only yourself, but to challenge others to be the best they can. I really like the story about the young lady who was pregnant because to be pregnant at 13, that's an awesome responsibility. You're talking about issues of poverty, issues of self esteem,
Yeah.
issues of rejection, and more. All of these things can creep into the life of a young girl who is pregnant at 13. And I'm really glad that you stood your ground, you assisted, and you actually saw her through. And I'm sure she would have appreciated all that help, and not just her, but her family and possibly the community as well. So, you have been doing this podcast. You're talking about my career, my calling. And even in talking to you, I've seen some of your calling coming out, and I've heard some of your the things coming out in terms of the marketplace, because the marketplace we all know is beyond the four walls of the church, and you have developed even this innovative training program at the workplace. And so, based on what you have said so far, you seem to have been doing a whole lot. So, this podcast now is actually, for want of a better word, to showcase and to tell others what you're doing to encourage them in the marketplace, and to also encourage persons like me and others to get involved in the marketplace. And there are so many ways in which we can get involved, I'm sure. And if we're not in the marketplace, we can be in the marketplace on our knees and through prayer and through encouragement. So, my next question is, what motivated you to do this podcast in talking about my career, my calling? What motivated you?
Thanks. So, my career, my calling is a concept I came up with in 2019 when I was running a radio program, particularly targeted at migrants in Australia to help them understand the Australian job market. It was a small project I did in collaboration with iCare Community Services, that specializes in multicultural disability support systems. And we had the opportunity to go for this community based grant. And I actually thought, if we were going to do something, what could we really do? And one of the issues that has come to me, people, let me tell you, I can't tell you how many people have come to me and asked me, how is it that you do so well in the marketplace? You know, you always have great jobs. You seem comfortable and confident. You don't stress about work, and you seem to be thriving. And I remember thinking, what is the one issue that people have come to me with over the years in, especially while I was in Australia? And it was always about difficulty finding a job. And a lot of the people I met, like the migrants, they would come here with very good qualifications, but they ended up doing something like 10 levels below their qualifications or their experiences. So I started the podcast about my career, my calling. And the calling component of it was really about living on purpose, not just doing anything that pays you money, but finding the job that you really want and living out your calling and your purpose in mark. So that's how this whole idea about this marketplace thing started for me. And I coined the term my career, my calling. Then of course, there was the pandemic, and I moved overseas for a couple of years to help. So my radio program got shelved. But this year I really felt led that I needed to go back to that dream, that vision I had around empowering people in to find and live out their calling by having the right job, having the right skills, having, the right abilities to find the right job and do what God really wanted them to do. So while I was setting up the marketplace missions movement, one of the things I wanted to do was to have a regular platform that I could provide information, but not just me talking, but also finding other people who were doing what they felt they were called to do, living out their purpose and sharing their stories as well. So That's how this whole podcast started, because I wanted to use the knowledge and the experiences and the skills that I have developed over the years. Like, it's almost 30 years of professional life, to help other people who need to see a real life example of someone who has struggled but have broken through, someone who has gone through what they are going through now, for want of a better word, that we have come up the food chain and we are now making a difference, or we've now been able to reach somewhere that other people can see a pathway that they could follow. So I wanted people to see that that is possible. And I thought having this podcast would be a great opportunity for me to be able to not only share my own experiences, but to get other people to share their experiences that could potentially encourage someone, be an example for someone, and provide some guidance along the way as well for people. So this is the whole the idea behind this podcast series.
Okay, you seem to have a grand idea in terms of having this podcast reach as many persons as possible. And it is also a motivational tool as well, and something that I'm sure you would want to transform lives while engaging, transforming lives as well. But who is your target audience? You talk about people, but you haven't. Is it men? Is it women? Is it both? Is it persons who are poor? Is it persons in the midstream income? Is it women? Is it men? Is it people in the church? Who would you consider your target audience?
My target audience are people who want to walk in their calling and they need the right support to do it in a faith inspired way. So that's the general bottom line. But I do recognize that most of the people who really struggle are actually women. So if I had a sub target audience, it will be women. Women who are out there who are just really struggling to find their feet, young professionals, students, moms who really want to see their career take off, that woman who is struggling to break through the glass ceiling in their professional life. I'd love to help those people in particular. But the material that we are providing here can inspire anyone who really wants to move forward with their lives.
Okay, so thank you. Um, when you're describing your target audience, one word or some words that were coming to me is that persons in extremely challenging situations. So whether they are males or females or poor or rich or black or white or wherever they are, but their situation is probably challenging for them, and you want to assist them in their career and their calling. So that
Yes.
question is plunging me into another question. I know you have said some of it before already, but tell me a little more about your marketplace experience. That's part A. And part B, what are some of the challenges, the hurdles that you had to, and have to, because it probably continuing in the marketplace. So tell me a little about your marketplace experience and some of the challenges that you faced within the marketplace, particularly one as a woman and two as a Christian.
Sure. Thank you. Marketplace. The marketplace, and for I think for those people who are listening that might be asking about what this whole marketplace thing mean, it's anywhere outside of your house that you exchange goods or services for value, right? So anything that you do it's a marketplace. Anywhere that you're exchanging goods or services for some kind of value is a marketplace. So if you're a shoemaker, dressmaker, or you just the church pastor, the organizer for something, wherever you are exchanging goods and services for value, that's a marketplace. My experience in the marketplace started quite early in my life. And I will start off by saying I think my very first experience was as a little girl that would use my pocket money to sell bonbon or pick naseberry from our family naseberry tree. and sell it at school to make pocket money. Yeah, so I was an entrepreneur from very early in my life. I would, sometimes my older brother would visit and give me a little money, and I would buy a bag of sweetie, the lollipop on the stick, and I would hide that when I go to school and sell that. And some of my classmates from high school, they remember me very well from for that. They still tease me about it. Yeah, but that was sometimes I had a little project or I needed something and I would sell whatever my hands could find, and turn that over and make some interest and I'd buy another one. Yeah. As a little girl too, my mom, we struggled financially. And my mom was a woman who lived by the motto, whatsoever your hands find to do, do it. So sometimes she would buy scrap cloth from, um, I can't remember the name of the place now, but we had a fabric place in Jamaica, and she would buy the little ends of the cloth that the cheap pieces, and she would put together little dresses. But the rest of my siblings probably didn't have that knack for selling like I did. So I would go to market with my mom, and when she couldn't sell anything, I used to be the one who would stand out there and put on all my little theatrics and get people to come and buy a dress that they even didn't want. But I think I had a knack of selling things. But for some strange reason, I grew up and I probably lost that streak, probably because of the environment, and I didn't have any good examples of people who were successfully doing this around me. But at the age of 16, I got my first job in a supermarket in Brownstown because I went to visit my friend's mom who was a cashier there. And I liked the woman very much. So while she was cashing, I would just stand there and start packing the bags for people. And one day, the owner of the supermarket came out and saw me and said, "Do you work here?" And I was very flustered. I didn't know what to say. And I took a while to answer him, not because I couldn't speak, but I was like, I didn't expect this question. And I got my first job that day because the man said, "Well, you're hired now." I just went into the supermarket, was packing people's bag while I was talking to my friend's mom, who was the cashier. And you know, instead of just standing there doing nothing, I just thought I would just pack the bags when she cashed. And the owner came out, saw me standing there packing bags, and he said, "You're hired." That's how I got my first job as just like a casual hand in a supermarket in Brownstown. It was a big supermarket. And then after that, after I finished community college, I went to work at the library in St. Anne's Bay. And that is how I was introduced to public health inspection from one of the staff there. So my experience in the marketplace started out very humbly. And my career in public health, I mean, if people search for me online, they will see all the stuff that I've achieved there. At 18 years old, I got a scholarship from the government of Jamaica to train as a public health inspector at the West Indies School of Public Health. And I finished my training. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I was deployed to a rural community where I started to work as a public health inspector in 1996. And I traveled up the ladder in a rapid pace because I believe that this is what God wanted. I worked very hard. I was very disciplined. And, I got exposed to international work in 2007 when I got my internship in the Caribbean Epidemiology Center in Trinidad and Tobago. And later on, after I finished my master's, I went back to Jamaica, and they called me back from the Caribbean Epidemiology Center asking if I could come and head up a regional research project for them on secondment. So the government of Jamaica sent me on secondment to CAREC, it was at the time. They are now the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And it was just a huge break for me, honestly. And I really believe that my steps were ordered by the Lord because it was while I was working in that role as a coordinator for this big regional study across the Caribbean, my supervisor said to me, "You need to do a PhD." And so that's how I ended up becoming interested in doing doctoral studies, because to be very honest, I didn't have any examples. There was nobody in my family who had been to university. There was no one that for me to look up to and say, okay, I want to be like this person. I want to follow this person's footsteps. All of those people were pretty much in the workplace for me. And this woman saw something in me that I didn't know was there. And she said, you need a PhD behind all of that talent that you have. And so that's how I started, looking for the scholarship. And I got a PhD scholarship to study in Sydney. Um, Challenges and hurdles that I've overcome. No, where do I begin? One of the biggest challenges I've faced in the workplace is jealousy. I think from what I've said so far, I'm a very giving person. I'm naturally generous. I I see people for who they are. I don't hold grudges very long, and I forgive easily. And so for me, because I'm this people person and always want to see people doing their best, I'm always giving and I'm always seeing something. But unfortunately, people don't necessarily see me, people don't necessarily reciprocate. And oftentimes, because I'm a forthright person, people can find that very threatening. And often I've seen people, not just people at my level, but people above me, become really threatened by my aura. People become afraid of my potential. And unfortunately, those who lack the leadership skills and abilities to harness the value that I bring, they can oftentimes try to cut me down. And that has been one of the challenges I have faced and encountered in the workplace. I I am I'm very outspoken. I speak what is on my mind. And in some years gone by, I wasn't as tactful as I probably am now. And so I would probably just say whatever comes to my mind. And I've learned over the years that I have to train that. But it can turn out to be like a double-edged sword as well. It has hurt me in the past because I will speak my mind, and because I have an integrity that is something that I value more than anything else. I don't compromise very easily, especially if it's something that comes to integrity. And people who are unscrupulous, people who are shady, people who are deceptive, they can be very uncomfortable around somebody like me because I say what I mean and I mean what I say. My faith inspires that trait in me. I don't budge, especially if it's something that concerns integrity. So people who are shady, unscrupulous, dishonest can try to put hurdles in my way. But thanks be to God, because of my faith and my unwavering faith, I have overcome. I have been able to overcome many a challenge. And I continue to thrive because I believe God sees my integrity and He understands that if I even say something that's a bit harsh, it's not because I mean to hurt people, but it's because of I'm straightforward. So people who are genuine will see that and they usually take it for what it is. But those who have ulterior motives or are led by some other spirit, they can find that a bit challenging. And that is usually where I can knock heads or lock horns with people. But thank God, by His grace, I've been able to overcome.
Thank you. So you talk about your biggest challenge being jealousy, right? And you elaborated a whole lot. Were there any challenges, say, either by way of your age, because you seem to have started young, two, because you were a woman, and three, because you are a Christian, and that by itself comes with a whole lot of challenges that you mentioned about not compromising. You're talking about unscrupulous persons and all of that, and the base of what you do. You talk about integrity. So, were there any other challenges in terms of with your age? You were young and aspiring. You got
Yes.
scholarships. You're moving up, and also whether as a woman you saw some threats and challenges as a woman, and the third thing as a Christian. Were there any challenges in these areas?
Yes, so starting with age, as a young woman, I entered the public health inspection field. There were just a few women around at that time. Um, and at, I was when I finished my training, I was only 20 years old. So I was very young and like green, green, green. And remember, I am from a family where we didn't have professionals in my family. So there wasn't any blue collar workers in my family for me to see what that looked like. So as this young, very green child, I was barely in my adult, just turned an adult. Age was a challenge at first because people, and I was always the youngest person. I was the youngest person in my class at college. I was the youngest person in when I graduated as a professional in the workplace. So I was always the youngest of this, youngest of that, you know. And sometimes, people would treat me as if I'm their child. So for example, my first supervisor graduated from training the year when I was born. And this man always treated me like I was his daughter. In fact, his daughter and I were in the same class at high school. So that was a huge challenge for me because my supervisor could be my father and I did treat him with the respect. But then there were days when I remember there was one situation where, as I said, I'm a straight arrow and I'm very uncompromising when it comes to the things that the law and my integrity. I remember one time we went to a big event, and as a law enforcer myself, there was something that happened that I needed to take a stance about it. And someone at the event went to report me to my supervisor. And I remember heard him he didn't do this behind my back. It was in front of me. And this is what he said. And I'm going to say it in my Jamaican patois, and then I will explain it in English. He said, this little hurry come up, girl. I saw the tan man. They just left college and come and they behave like say they know everything. And basically, what he was saying is that I was young, I didn't have the experience or the wisdom to deal with anything. This is what my supervisor said to a complainant in my presence. This was not somebody who told me in front of me. So there was always this challenge of trying to prove my credibility as a young person. Yeah. And however, thank God, I think it became very clear to people very early that this young woman was not going anywhere and she was not going to budge. Right? So my integrity was what now began to give me a platform to stand on despite my age. As a woman, that was something else. There was sexual harassment. The same guy, the same man, I remember he used to make these very sleazy comments sometimes. And I think when he realized very early on that he was not going to get anywhere with me, he would do it to some of our interns that would come. But he would make the comments like if I wore a certain kind of dress, he would talk about my shape and stuff like that. And back in those days, I think the whole sexual harassment policies were not as strong as they are now.
There was none.
And yeah, and people would even so-called jokingly say things, but we know now that these things were sexual harassment. Yeah, they would say things that were uncomfortable, to me as a woman. And then also they would think that because you're a woman, you didn't have the strength. I used to go into slaughterhouses, and I'm talking about the big abattoirs where men were slaughtering animals with a lot of blood. And I remember the very first time I went into one, I was so overwhelmed with the amount of masculine pheromones and blood. As a 20-year-old, all of this blood and men with sharp knives in their hands. And I was thinking to myself, what on earth have I done? What am I doing here? However, I knew that I was walking in my purpose. I knew that without a shadow of a doubt, God had called me in the public health field and I was not out of place. So it took a little while for me to gain that confidence that God has put you here. You're not going anywhere. So as a woman, I faced the sexual harassment, the you're a woman, how could you know something like this, or you don't have the strength? And people would look at my femininity as a weakness. However, with time, you know what God did? I began to grow in my strength. My feminine power began to come out of me. Like somehow I began to learn how to harness that as a as not as a weakness, but actually as a strength. The compassion I had was second to none. The way I could understand people's feelings and people's issues in a way that my male counterparts were unable to do. And that attracted people to me because I was able to feel their pain in a way that the men could not. So my femininity became an issue, but thank God I was able to use it as a strength instead of a weakness over time. As a Christian, my Christianity was not a major issue when I was in Jamaica because Jamaica, as a Christian country, people were not very bashful if you said you were a Christian. I didn't usually walk around telling people I'm a Christian, but people would know because there were certain things I wouldn't do, and there were certain places I wouldn't go, and I wouldn't take part in certain conversations as well. I've never been somebody who gossip, and people, I've always tried to be balanced in terms of the way I speak. But moving to Australia was this so-called Christian country, but nobody spoke about their Christianity at work. It wasn't like in Jamaica where somebody would share their issue and you could offer to pray for them. I came here and it was just not okay. You didn't just walk up to people and tell them here. But as thank God, when I came, I didn't know all of those things. So I would just anywhere I go, I would introduce myself as a Christian because I'm an evangelist. Um, but over time, I started to realize that people would give me funny looks, and even the so-called Christians would look at me funny and kind of, almost apologetically. But I, I started to really understand this at work when people just, like people didn't pray before events, or people didn't introduce prayer or any kind of godly activities in anything, which I wasn't used to coming from a very religious country that was Christian. Um, but as a PhD student, I feel like people kind of avoided me because I didn't go to partying, I didn't go clubbing, and I wouldn't go drinking at the pub with them. And when people asked me why, I would say it's because I'm a Christian and we just don't do those things. So I didn't have many close friends among my peers because I was this Christian and I had all these so-called values according to them that prohibited me from doing the natural stuff, which was Friday evenings, people would go to the pub and have a drink and they would go in groups. So if you were part of a research group, people would go out, and that was how people socialized. It was foreign to me, Sister Jennifer, and I didn't know how to do it. It was so foreign, and I didn't know how to adjust myself to fit into that. And so I never made friends outside. I never had any deep, like intimate relationships with my colleagues because of that. So pretty much all of my very close friends were people I met at church. In some ways, I feel like this affected me because my network did not expand very well outside of that, just that professional relationship outside of work. But I really don't have any regrets about it. Um, I have I have traveled to many countries though, where as a Christian, I was able to subtly minister to people and to use my gift, my giftings as a Christian to make an impact in people's lives.
Okay, that is a mouthful. I will sit down and listen to you all day, but we don't have all day to do this. But while you were talking, one thing came to mind, and it's a little song that says, "This little light of mine, I am going to let it shine, let it shine all the while." And I see where, based on all the various questions that I've asked you, a little about yourself, what you're passionate about, what motivated you, who is your target audience, your experience in the marketplace. I've seen where all of these things, and through all of them, you have allowed your light to shine and you have kept it burning. And I'm really happy for that, that you have stood your ground. And when you talk about sexual harassment, it's a real thing in the workplace. And if you're not careful, you can become a target of
Yes.
harassers. But thank God, you stood your ground. So you have said so much this evening, so many things. Um, and as I talk about that light, the scripture says, without a vision, the people perish. So, what is your vision for this podcast? Where are you going? Where do you want to take it? Who do you want to incorporate in the podcast? What do you want people to learn? What's your vision as we come to the next steps after, and then we'll wrap up? What's your vision? Where you want it to go? Where are you taking us?
Yes. So as I said earlier, that I wanted this podcast to be a platform where we could present real life stories of people who have suffered, who have overcome, who are succeeding as Christians in the marketplace, right? We want to distill information from people's experiences that can help listeners relate to our stories and find strength to grow and to succeed in their own personal growth and development. We really want to use this podcast as an avenue to uplift, to build up, to encourage people to walk in purpose and to walk on purpose, to walk for purpose. This is the vision of this podcast.
Okay. And I think that's a very broad vision that you have there. And I'm sure as people continue to listen to the podcast, they'll get more fine tuned vision from what you are presenting. But overall, you actually want to uplift people, for people to
Yeah.
know that there is strength in the marketplace. And then also, you can be very strong in the marketplace. So, Dr. Stephanie Fletcher Larty, what's the next steps in a few rounding minutes?
Yes.
Next steps for you and for the podcast.
Thanks. So we've got a few podcasts lined up, and I've got some really powerhouses scheduled. We have a few. I'll just give you a quick idea of some of the ones coming up. We're going to be talking from purpose to fulfillment. Finding and living on purpose is coming up. We're going to be talking about um, dreaming, how to how to dream. And I'm talking about not just having a dream, but how to tap into your dreams when you go to bed at night and you have those dreams, how God uses your dreams to help you to fuel your passion, and how by understanding those dreams you'll be able to find direction, yeah, just like I have. And we'll also be talking to, I have a person who I will interview. This person is an HIV positive person. I am going to be talking to them about from life to rebirth, a life of purpose after HIV. Someone who's gone through the grueling experience but have found purpose and is living out on purpose. And then I have a kids author who will be I'll be bringing online, who will be talking about embracing their journey and embracing your journey and talking about this from the perspective as how can parents help their children to embrace their journey from early? How do you identify your children's giftings so you can help to channel these children in the right direction for their calling? And then finally, I want to also share about the the webinar that's coming up. It's going to be on the 24th of April. And this webinar is going to be kind of like a big part of our podcast series, but I'm doing it as a webinar so we can invite our audience to be part of it. We're going to really talk about leveling up your career, breaking through the glass ceiling. And if I just have just 1 second, even to just mention this,
Go
right?
ahead.
Um, in this webinar, we are going to be talking about leveling up your career. The webinar is going to be on April 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. This webinar is for young professionals, those who are about to finish high school, or you're just entering the job market, or if you're already in the job market, but you feel stuck and struggling. I I have partnered with a few people, including yourself, and we're going to be talking about how people can tap into the skills they already have. What do you call them again, Jen? You have a word for that.
Oh, I call it crossover. No, you
The
call it.
crossover
I call it
skills.
crossover skills,
And I
right?
call them transferable skills. Yeah.
Yes.
We're gonna talk about crossover or transferable skills. Skills you already have that you can streamline and organize and help you to go to the next level in your career. Instead of being stuck and just going around in circles and marching on the spot. What can you do with what you already have in your hand? We're also going to talk about this proverbial glass ceiling that people feel like I can't break through. I've been in this one position for 15 years. There's no promotion. There's What do you do to take yourself to the next level? So it's going to be a conversation. We're going to present, some information, but I'm really encouraging people who are if you find yourself as a professional, you feel like you can't break through, you're just marching on the spot, you don't know how to take the skills you already have to get that promotion you've been looking for. And we're also probably going to touch on a few of the things you just mentioned around gender as well. How can we mainstream that? Instead of people using your gender as a woman against you, how do you tap into that strength like I have? Use that feminine power in you to your advantage. All right. So this is the next step. So we've got a few podcasts lined up. We're really going to talk about these, and we're sharing from professionals who are believers who are doing well in the workplace. But we're also going to be crowning that, or we're starting off next 2 weeks with our webinar, leveling up your career, breaking through the glass ceiling. So that's the next steps from
Thank you
here.
so much, Dr. Stephanie Fletcher Larty. You are such an inspiration, not just to me, but to, I'm sure, to others who are listening. And whether you're listening now or at a later date, I'm sure in the marketplace you'd have been able to gather something that Dr. Stephanie has said that can help you in your life, particularly in the marketplace. And so I would encourage everyone to listen to the podcast, learn as much as you can, and also share the podcast with others, because this is not just for me, it's not just for Dr. Steph, it's not just for you, but it's for everyone. And in our daily lives, we all face the marketplace, whether it's the place at your work or it's your community, even the streets where you buy, the stores, everywhere you meet people, anywhere outside of the four walls of your church, where goods and services are exchanged, is considered your marketplace. And so it's very important that within the marketplace we know how to hone, HONE, our skills, how to level up, how to put ourselves together, how to overcome the challenges, and how to be an encourager. So I'd really encourage you to follow these podcasts and listen to them. And you can contact Dr. Fletcher, Fletcher Larty. I'm sure she'll share her contact with you so that you can either become a part of the podcast or you can help in any way to strengthen the work that she's doing. And so I thank you, Dr. Stephanie, for giving me the pleasure of just talking to you today to get a better feel of who you are, your experiences, your strengths, your weaknesses, and how you navigate your space and how you negotiate within that space. Last thing I think I'd want to say is have you ever thought of having prayer, not necessarily going into workplaces, because that can be threatening, especially in a system where it might not be welcome, but having a prayer support group for marketplace? Because sometimes people are in the marketplace and they need the strength to know there are persons who are praying for them and they have that support team. So I'm throwing that out to you, Dr. Steph, that you could think about it or dedicate one of the podcasts to a time of prayer for persons within the marketplace. So that's all I have to say today, Dr. Steph. So I turn back over to you for your closing remarks, just to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Sister Jennifer Williams. I really sincerely appreciate just having you here on the platform with me and helping me to share the vision behind the Marketplace Missions Movement podcast, My Career, My Calling. And I really appreciate just having someone with the experience as well who understands how to pull out, what's inside of you. And I just really truly hope that what I've shared here today will inspire someone. Maybe somebody might want to start a podcast too. It I hope that this will inspire people to live their best life, but we also would love to inspire people to look out for the next podcast in the series and to share these podcasts with people who you might be doing really well right now. You might feel like, I'm just doing really well, I'm making my millions already. What could these people teach me? But there might be someone who needs the information we're sharing here, who needs just that little inspiration. Maybe what we are saying is is not for you, but you might know someone who could really use that lift, that could use that inspiration from people. We haven't arrived yet, but we are on that journey, and we want to use our experiences that have brought us to where we are now to help those who are still on their journey. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you once again, Jennifer, for
Thank you
help.
too.
All right. So this has brought us to the end of this podcast, and we do look forward to seeing you again for the next in the series as we bring you another My Career, My Calling. Until then, thanks for joining us. It's bye bye for now.
Thank you. Bye bye.